When you merely call a raise, you have to hit the flop. You have to play the hand later. You don't get the added value of just picking up the blinds, which is a big part of the game. There's a lot of times in later stages of the tournament, there's a lot of money in the pot being from the 2 blinds. They add antes later in the rounds, which means blinds being 2 and 400, and all 9 players around the table put $50 in, which means there's, to start off, there's actually $1,050 in the pot. That's a lot of money. You want to pick up that money. And if you're not first in the pot, your chances of picking it up right here and there is not that big. So let me just emphasize it one more time. If you're first in on the button, race with pretty much anything. You can always low play, but in general you will get the most effective results by leading out, because it leaves your opponent guessing. A lot of times in that spot, if you check raise, people would know you would have it, but the lead out, maybe they check raise you to mess with you, and then you get a bigger payout on your big hand. I will play those funky hands once in a while. Actually, the reason why I only bet $50 at the end was the fact I could have the best hand, in which I would like people to call, of course. But if I was beat, I would much rather bet 50 than have one of you guys bet 200 at me, and then I would be faced with a tough decision. Because a lot of times it's harder to raise. When I bet, it's hard for you to raise because you feel like I could have a very strong hand or a medium, whatever. It's easier for you to be betting if it was check-check. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I tried to bet $50 to keep the pots as small as possible. I didn't want anybody to bet like 300 at me. I recommend in early positions that you only play solid premium hands. Medium big pairs, of course, all the premium hands, aces and kings, goes without saying, but definitely limit the variety of hands you play just because you're in a bad position. Middle position, you can loosen up a little bit. You can start throwing it a couple of more hands, maybe some lower pairs, some suited connectors, 8, 9 of spades, 9, 10 of hearts, some weaker aces, ace 10, ace 9. Once you get around the table and nobody is in before you and you're on the button, you can pretty much play anything. You have a tremendous power over the blinds. You're always last to act, and maybe you'll just pick up the blinds right here. The thing is, even though the king 8 added up to 21 and you felt you were in a position where you could play that hand, once you get called, the strength of that hand diminishes a lot. It really is a hard hand to really flop something good. Sometimes you will flop the top pair, a pair of kings, and it turns out to a very nice hand. But sometimes the 9, 10 of spades, even though you add them together, it only adds up to 19 instead of the 21. Being suited, being connected does add some value. So remember that, take that into the equation. It plays better on the flop. When you flop a flush draw, when you flop a straight draw, it adds some strength to the hand. You can play it, you can bluff it, you can do a lot more things than with a king 8, where you're only really hoping to flop a pair. So the playability after the flop is also an important factor. So just to make sure that you shouldn't just look at every hand and do the math, add 7 to 11 and say 18, well, I'm not going to play this hand. Also look at the playability after. Pairs then can flop big hands, get big payouts. Pair of 7, you can flop 3 sevens. 9, 10, you can flop straights, flushes, and get a big payout after the flop. Playability in the flop also plays a big role in your decision making, but big cards are important in Hold'em. Let's talk about playing the blinds. Being the blinds, you're at a disadvantage. You have to put in money in the pot without looking at your cards. You're first to act on every betting round, except for the first betting rounds. Everybody is going to act before you, so you're last to act. But what's more than often is going to happen is somebody will have raised you or limped in. But you, as the big blind, as the small blind, you always have the option to call the small raise, just to tap the table and see a flop. But the fact that you already have money in the pot does change your decision making a lot. Again, let's use the basic example of a tournament. Blinds at 25-50, and you're playing a $10,000 tournament. Somebody raises, let's say, to 150. You're in the big blind. You already have $50 in there. Your starting requirements is a lot lower than it would be if you were somewhere else in the pot and you didn't already have money in the pot. Basically, what I'm trying to say is a raise of 150, where you're not in the blinds, you would have to call the full 150. Are you in the big blind with $50 in there already? Now it's only $100 more to call, which means with his 150, your own 50, maybe even the small blind of 25, you're calling 100 to win 225. That drastically changes the odds of making it a good call or whatsoever. So your starting requirements are lower because your odds are getting higher.
Understanding outs and odds will improve your decisions at the poker table. Outs are cards remaining in the deck that will improve your hand if they land on the board. How many cards will improve your hand if your hole cards are 9 of diamonds, 10 of diamonds, and the flop comes 7 of diamonds, 8 of clubs, 9 of hearts? In this case, on the turn, there are 4 jacks that will make a straight, 4 sixes that will make a straight, 2 nines that will give you trips, and 3 tens that will give you 2 pair.
That's a total of 13 outs already.
Factor in the river, and you've got the possibility of a boat, 4 of a kind, flush, and even a straight flush. Be cautious about counting outs that will make losing hands, and remember, the same card can't fall twice. That's important when calculating the odds of catching your outs, as explained in the supplemental material, accessed via the DVD menu. Odds are also thought of in the following terms. Pot odds, the amount you wager compared to the size of the pot. For example, you may have to wager $20 for the possibility of winning $40. Your pot odds are therefore 2 to 1. Implied odds, the estimated amount you'll have wagered compared to the total amount that will be in the pot when all betting rounds are over. If you expect to wager $100 to win $150 over the course of the entire hand, then your implied odds are 1.5 to 1. To estimate your odds after the flop, use the multiplier rule. To use the multiplier rule, simply multiply your number of outs by 2. This will estimate the percentage of times that you will make your hand on the turn. Multiply your number of outs by 4 to estimate the percentage of times you will make your hand after both the turn and the river cards. After the turn, you can use this rule again.
Simply recalculate your outs and multiply them by 2.
Again, this estimates the percentage of times that you will make your hand. Ideally, you always want the odds of catching your outs to be equal to or greater than your estimated implied odds. For example, if you have 5 to 1 on making your hand, you want a 5 to 1 return on your money. No limit hold'em is way more complicated than outs and odds, largely because people bluff. Buying pots and stealing blinds are a major part of the game. In Disc 4 with Phil Lock, you will master the math behind stealing.